Professor Zaghloul, iron, one of the most important elements on this planet. We need to know how it started and where did it come from?
I begin by praising Allah, our Creator, the Creator of the universe and of everything that's in it, the sole master of everybody and of everything, without parallels, partners, or similitudes, and seek his blessings on Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the end of that long chain of prophets and messengers sent by Allah for the guidance of man. And I greet you and your audience in our Islamic way. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah's peace, blessings, and mercy be with you all. To begin with, I have to emphasize the fact that iron is the most abundant metal in Earth. Iron constitutes around 35.9% of the total mass of the Earth, which is estimated at around 6,000 million tons. So the Earth contains at least 2,000 million tons of iron. Most of that iron is actually in the core of the Earth. And the Earth has got a solid inner core, wherein the percentage of iron is 90%, and an outer molten core, wherein the same percentage stays at 90%, and then the percentage of iron decreases gradually as we proceed from inside the Earth outwardly until it reaches 5.6% in the outer rocky cover of the Earth.
And this decrease is gradual, or is it it's random?
No, the decrease gradually. Decrease gradually. From 90% in the core, both the solid inner core and the molten outer core, and then starts to decrease gradually until it becomes 5.6% in the crust of the Earth.
Yes.
And scientists have always wondered where that immense quantity of iron has come from. And believing that the Earth, the Moon, and the other planets of the solar system were actually derived from the Sun, they thought that iron is generated in the Sun. But a detailed study of the Sun has proved that the bulk composition of the Sun is hydrogen. And the great energy that is emitted from the Sun comes from a process called nuclear fusion. And by the process of nuclear fusion, nuclei of light elements fuse together to produce nuclei of heavier elements. So the main process in the Sun goes from hydrogen to helium. 4 nuclei of hydrogen fuse together to produce a single nucleus of helium, and the difference in mass between the 4 nuclei of hydrogen and the nucleus of helium is great. And this comes out as the energy of the Sun that gives its core something in the order of 15 million degrees centigrade, or absolute. And this decreases gradually to 6,000 degrees centigrade at the periphery of the Sun, at the corona. And the emanations that are coming from the Sun can reach 1 million to 2 million degrees centigrade. So the process does not exceed anything beyond silicon. And people wondered, aluminium, silicon. If the Earth was separated from the Sun, and the Sun does not contain iron, where did this huge quantity of iron come from?
Is iron greater than aluminum and silicon?
The atomic weight is much greater. You are a chemical engineer.
The percentage of iron in Earth.
Definitely. You see, iron constitutes 35.9%.
Okay.
And of course, the atomic weight of iron is much higher than silicon.
Silicon, yes.
And because the process of nuclear fusion in the Sun does not reach iron, it's impossible to reach iron, you see. So the question was raised, where did this immense quantity of iron in the core of the Earth and throughout its different zones has come from? In the early days of space travel, astronomers were seriously afraid from any impact of meteoric body with the spaceship. And meteorites are the product of explosion of different heavenly bodies. And we have three main types of meteorites. We have iron meteorites, we have iron stony meteorites, and stony meteorites. And this difference or this variation indicate that this must be the explosion of something like the Earth, having an inner core of iron and an outer core of rock, where the percentage of iron decreases gradually. So they started studying where did these meteoric bodies come from. For centuries, people thought that these meteoric bodies are coming from within the solar system. But for their surprise, they found that these meteoric bodies actually travel to the Earth from fantastically great distances from outside our solar system. This drove scientists to study the chemical composition of the observed universe. And they were again actually surprised to find that the bulk of the chemical composition of the observed universe is hydrogen. Hydrogen alone constitutes more than 74% of the total composition of the observed universe, followed by helium. Helium constitutes 24% of the chemical composition of the observed universe. And this made science really wonder. The lightest two elements, the most simply composed two elements, constitute more than 98% of the chemical composition of the observed universe. And the rest of 105 known elements constitute less than 2%. This produced a theory on the origin of elements. And the theory says that, they call it the origination of elements. The theory says that all elements are currently being generated or produced or created in the cores of stars by the process of nuclear fusion. And the end product of this process is iron. Iron does not form in the core of the sun. And it was found that iron is generated by the process of nuclear fusion at the cores of supergiants that are 10 to 15 times the mass of the sun. Supergiant stars, yes. And at a particular phase in their process of development. So a supergiant star, once it explodes, it produces what we call a supernova. And during the production of the supernova, great pressure at the core of the star can enhance the process of nuclear fusion to produce iron.
Supernova is a smaller star. Or
That is a huge star.
But smaller than the star.
Than the original one, of course. Okay. You see, once the core of the star has completely changed into iron, it exhausts the energy of the star and the star explodes.
Okay.
And this iron core is dissipated into outer space. It can reach any heavenly body in need for iron. And it reaches the Earth up till now in the form of large or small meteoric bodies.
The driving force that drives the iron.
The explosion.
Only the explosion.
The explosion.
The detonation.
The reason for this explosion is that the process of nuclear fusion is exothermic. It releases energy. Until it reaches iron, it becomes endothermic. It consumes the energy of the star. And that's why the core of the star explodes. And this dissipation comes as the product of that explosion. So it took many years until scientists came to prove that all the iron in our Earth and in our solar system was physically sent down to us.
And this size, the products of this explosion, the size of the meteorites that hit the Earth, the iron, big sizes or?
Varies, of course. You see, it depends on how much shattered this core would be. You can get huge pieces, you can go to get smaller pieces, you see.
Fuad means it's not uniform.
I beg your pardon?
Fuad means it's not uniform.
No, it's not
it's
uniform.
random.
Not uniform. Smaller bodies can burn completely in the Earth's atmosphere and are called meteors, and only leave behind some ash that will fall on the Earth.
Yeah.
But the bigger ones, although they partially melt in the process of having friction with the atmosphere, still, you can reach the Earth with several tons. In Juba, in southern Sudan, a meteoric body fell down at the beginning of the century, and it weighs 90 tons of pure iron. And imagine this 90 ton, of course, its original mass must be much heavier than that, due to the friction with the atmosphere. And even if you could imagine the 90 ton of pure iron would hit a spaceship to destroy it completely.
Doctor, so we have the iron inside the Earth, correct?
Yes.
So is it started from the creation of the Earth, from before the creation of the Earth, or after the Earth was created, or both?
No, this was after the creation of what we call the proto-Earth,
Right.
the early Earth.
Okay.
And that's why scientists come to believe that the proto-Earth, or the early Earth, was nothing more than a heap of ash.
Right.
Okay.
And this heap of ash was bombarded with iron meteorites. By virtue of the density of the iron, it penetrated this heap of ash. And it did melt by what we call the heat of settlement. It was traveling at a fantastic speed,
Right.
and once it stops,
down, yeah.
this energy is reflected in the form of heat. So due to the heat of settlement, and also it's coming by a high temperature as well, and the heat of settlement, it did melt, and did cause that heap of ash also to melt, and to be differentiated into the several zones of the Earth, which we call them the 7 Earths. I think we spoke about that before.
Yes, in the last episode.
We have a solid inner core, mainly composed of iron, 90%, and nickel, 9%, a molten outer core, having the same composition, 90% iron and 9% nickel, and 1% light elements like phosphorus, carbon, sulfur. And then immediately we have 4 layers of mantle, in which the percentage of iron decreases gradually towards the outer surface of the Earth, and then we have the crust of the Earth having no more than 5.6% of iron. So this proved beyond a doubt that all iron in our solar system and in our Earth was physically sent down to us.
SubhanAllah. Professor Zaghloul will go for a short break, and after a break I have a question for you, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you, dear viewers. Be with us after the break. Welcome back, dear viewers, and continuing our conversation with Professor Zaghloul. Professor Zaghloul, how frequently are we visited by these iron balls?
You see, there is not really a detailed statistics about how frequently we receive them, but it is calculated that we receive annually between several tens of thousands of tons of iron to several millions, actually, of tons of iron. Some of these meteoric bodies are huge, and some of them are small. The huge ones can really penetrate the crust of the Earth and create huge craters like the volcanic craters, as is found in Arizona and in Russia and in Saudi Arabia, in many parts of Rab al Khali, the empty quarter. And of course, it depends on the strength of the impact. Sometimes this depth is 500 meters. It can reach up to 1 kilometer. And the diameter of the crater would be actually several kilometers sometimes. So it depends on the impact. Sometimes we get smaller meteoric bodies in the deserts, scattered on the surface of the sand. And they did not penetrate deeply, but they are found on the surface. But as a result of the impact, they were fractured into little pieces, and they can be caught on the surface of the ground.
But do they always fall in the same place?
No. By the mercy of Allah, most of these meteoric bodies fall in uninhabited areas,
Subhanallah.
in deserts, in Siberia, in Arizona.
And didn't scholars wonder why this happens?
It's just a mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Because imagine a rock mass like the Juba meteoric body, 90 tons of pure iron, would hit the Empire State in America. It would flatten it to nothing, really, to destroy it completely. So the fact that meteoric bodies usually fall in areas that are mostly uninhabited is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
But they don't have a scientific notation for that.
There is no statistics, really.
So they have to believe in the mercy of Allah.
Well, if they like to believe, because cannot force it on others, you see. But yes.
Doctor, excuse me, I have a question here.
Yes.
We know from history
Yes.
that the Iron Age
Yes.
started at approximately the year 1000 BC.
Yes.
That means before the Prophet Muhammad, about 1600 years before the Prophet Muhammad. Question is, how did the early Muslims reacted with this verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran that we actually brought down the iron from up there, from up heaven?
Yes.
How did they react with it? How did they explain it?
This is what I was coming to.
Yes.
You see, the fact that iron in our earth was physically sent down to us and down to our solar system at large was not agreed upon until the last few decades of the 20th century. 25 years ago, if somebody would come to me and tell me that iron in our earth was physically sent down to us, probably I would question that, because we had no evidence.
Yes.
You see, we had no evidence whatsoever. The amazing thing is that in the Quran, we find that the only element for which a surah or chapter was coined after its name is iron. We have a chapter in the Quran called Surah Al-Hadid, the chapter on iron, or Surah Iron. Why did Allah choose this particularly? And the Quran reads, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ. Verily, we have sent down our messengers with the البينات, the
Miracles,
everything
signs,
that's
evidence.
obvious and clear to everybody. وأنزلنا معهم الكتاب والميزان. And we have sent down with them the book and the balance. And the balance of everything that's right and that's wrong, so that people can judge by it. وأنزلنا معهم الكتاب والميزان وأنزلنا الحديد. And verily we have sent down iron, wherein there is mighty strength and many beneficial aspects for mankind. It's really amazing. If Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the source of that Quran, as many of the enemies of Islam try to claim, where did he get that information from? You see, nobody until the end of the 20th century had any knowledge about the origin of iron in our earth or in our solar system. Nobody at all. And if a scientist would stand up and say, yes, this iron was sent down to us, although we know that there are iron meteorites that fall on the earth, but nobody would dare to say this. You see, for a book revealed more than 14 centuries ago, to spell out this fact in plain words, وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدَ فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيدٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. Verily we have sent down iron, wherein there is mighty strength and many beneficial aspects for mankind. Early commentators, of course, believing that the Quran is the word of Allah, they try to understand this. What does the Quran mean? We have physically sent down iron. And comparing the descent of iron with sending messages from heaven, you see, simulating exactly the same process of revealing knowledge through angels to previous prophets and messengers from Allah. They said, but for iron, you see, it must mean that it was created in that way. They said, أنزلنا هنا بمعنى خلقنا. It may mean we have created it in that way, you see. And they concentrated on the two aspects, فيه بأس شديد ومنافع للناس, wherein there is mighty strength and many beneficial aspects for mankind. The mighty strength was explained in the past by the particular physical-chemical characteristics of iron. But only lately we came to find out that the iron nucleus is the most strongly bound nucleus of any element at all. Of any element. You see, the binding force between the elementary particles in the nucleus of elements start with hydrogen, reach its peak at iron, and descends again. So even elements with a much greater atomic weight than iron, their nuclei is less dense and less perfectly attached to each other than iron. And that's why the Quran says, فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيد, wherein there is mighty strength.
So this description can only fit iron.
Can only fit
And
iron.
it differed from the rest by far.
A great distance. You see the curve starting from hydrogen, reaching its peak at iron, and then falling down. Even uranium, which is the heaviest known natural element, is less strongly bound than iron. Much less strongly bound than iron. And that's why it decays as a radioactive element, you see. So nowadays we understand a different meaning for this Quranic word, فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيد, wherein there is mighty strength. Because of this strongly bound elementary particles in the nucleus of iron, iron was given these particular physical-chemical characteristics that are unique for iron. It's not for any other element. فيه بأس شديد ومنافع للناس. Most commentators, of course, concentrated on the area of the benefits of iron to humanity. Nowadays, we believe that iron is the backbone of all industries,
Of course.
Civil or military. Iron in the earth is one of the main reasons of giving it a certain degree of settlement. And the Quran says Allah has made the earth for you a settled abode. Yes. And without this huge mass of iron in the core of the earth, it would have never been a balanced planet or a settled planet. With iron, the gravitational field and the magnetic field of the earth has become so effective to enable it to withhold its atmosphere, its hydrosphere, as well as life on its surface. Without the magnetic field of the earth, of course, withholding the atmosphere alone would have been virtually impossible.
So gravity is because of iron?
Yes, yes, because of iron, yes. Thirdly, iron makes the bulk of the red matter in the blood, the red blood corpuscles. And if there was no iron in earth, life would have been virtually impossible. And iron also constitutes a great deal of the green material in plants.
Yes.
And without iron, no plantation could have taken place. You see, and the amazing thing is that the structure of the red blood corpuscles, the molecule of red blood, or the red material in it, and the molecule of the green material in plants are exactly the same, with only one difference. The core in the blood is iron, and here the core is magnesium. But iron is still there as well.
Yes.
So really, without iron, life would have virtually been impossible. And it would be absolutely amazing to see a book revealed more than 14 centuries ago specifies a particular chapter on iron. And we find in that chapter a detail of the origin of iron in our Earth and in our solar system. It defines the unusual binding of the iron nucleus, فيه بأس شديد, wherein there is mighty strength, defines that precisely before any science would have reached that. And we find as well the spelling out the very many benefits for mankind which Allah has placed in that ayah.
We also like to mention the arrangement, the number of the surah,
Yes.
and the number of the verse.
This is again a unique aspect of this surah, because Allah, I didn't notice it myself. I was giving a lecture in Australia many years ago. And I visited 7 different universities. And in the last lecture I was giving there, I spoke about the descent of iron from outer space to the earth. And a chemistry professor in the university stood up and asked me, "Sir, have you ever pondered about the relationship between the number of the surah and the atomic weight of iron, and the number of the verse in the surah and the atomic number of iron?" Because I usually put the Arabic verse, or the verse in Arabic, and put below it the name of the surah and the number of the ayah in it. But when I translate that into English, I don't want to bother the observer or the audience with the name of the surah, especially most of them are non-Arabs, and they cannot know what surah means. So I put the number of the surah and put a colon and put the number of the verse. So he picked up these 5725. I said, "Wallahi, I never pondered about that, but let me think about it, because I do believe that numbers are a big pitfall, and unless you are very careful, you can destroy yourself if you deal with numbers." He said, "I hope when you go home you can think over it and let me know." I reached Cairo after 22 hours of flight, completely exhausted, but I couldn't resist verifying this. I went to my study, picked up a book on inorganic chemistry, the periodic table, and the Holy Quran. And for my surprise, I found that there are 3 isotopes of iron having the atomic weight 54, 56, and 57. And the number of the surah is 57.
SubhanAllah.
Then I found that the atomic number of iron is around 26. And the number of the verse is 25. I said, this must have an explanation. And immediately it came to my mind a Quranic verse that would solve this problem. Because the Quran is addressing Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam by saying, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِنَ الْمَثَانِي وَالْقُرْآنَ الْعَظِيمِ. We have given you 7 of these oft-repeated verses and the great Quran. So the Quran, by definition, the 7 oft-repeated verses are Al-Fatiha, the opening of the Quran. So it's separating Al-Fatiha from the rest of the Quran. And if we take Al-Fatiha out, the number of the surah will be 56, which is the most abundant isotope of iron. And we know that Al-Fatiha is 6 verses. And most commentators of the Quran say Al-Basmalah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, is a verse. So why not be a verse in every surah it's mentioned at the beginning of it? Yes. So if you add the Al-Basmalah
to be 26.
Excuse me. At the beginning of Surah Al-Hadid, the verse becomes 26. And this cannot be just by mere chance or accident. It must be very precisely intended to testify to everybody that the glorious Quran cannot be the work of man. It is the divine work in its divine purity that has been preserved in exactly the same language of revelation for more than 14 centuries. And the divine promise is to preserve it until the end of this world by saying, إِنَّا نَحْنَ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Verily, we have sent down the reminder, and verily, we will always be preserving it.
Thank you, Professor Zaghloul. We can only say SubhanAllah from deep of our hearts, and we have come to the end of our episode today. Thank you, dear viewers. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.